About midway last week, when I came home from work, I noticed my shed door was open and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken. And I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. Me and my friends tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year. And I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon because I like big payouts. It's 10 cents a can where I live after all. But there were more than just bags of cans missing from the shed too. They took my gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels, one of them being one of those folding camping ones, a full 2-gallon gas can, a cheap power drill I got for like $5 used, an electric hedge trimmer, and a small electric chainsaw that was also used, and a machete. They didn't touch the lawnmower, weed whacker, extension cords, or the old radio I had in there. No idea why they took what they did, but I guess they figured they could resell them or something. I checked my camera footage and there were my 3 nephews, ages 16, 15, and 14, breaking into my shed with one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognized the hammer breaking into my shed with one of their... I recognized the hammer because it's bright yellow and black and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash that cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand, and then they came back with some shopping carts that I guess they also stole, but it took them a few trips to get all of the cans, so they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. My sister and brother-in-law first denied their kids stole anything from me, so I went to their house and showed them the security footage from my cameras. I'd not told them I'd had cameras installed, and the reason I had the cameras put in was because of prior thefts by my nephews. It started with food and snacks and then moved on to DVDs and video games. Then pretty much anything they thought they could smuggle out after that. And any time I made them return stuff they'd stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy and then got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble from their parents either. The final straw happened last year when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 6-packs of my favorite blood orange beer from my fridge. They used my hidden spare key to get in and also took a huge dump in one of my bathrooms and not only didn't flush, but also peed all over the floor. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. The beer they stole was hidden in one of their bedrooms. When I confronted my sister and brother-in-law about it, I was basically given an equivalent to boys will be boys when I wanted them punished. So I had the cameras put in and told no one, which was a smart move. When my sister and brother-in-law saw the camera footage of my nephews stealing from me, they seemed furious, but they were actually madder that their boy skipped school to steal from me. They'd spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle drop and cashing the cans by machine. The bottle drop also pays by machine, so they kept bringing the cans in till they cashed them all. And then they brought video games and junk food with the money. Said money actually amounted to nearly $200. With that and the destroyed padlock, I told my sister and brother-in-law that they now owed me $200. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry to their kids to making excuses for them and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me before I go to the cops. I got back everything else my nephew stole, machete and gas can included, though they'd already used the gas for something. But over the next couple of days, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone with a ton of messages, both verbal and text. At first, they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays and they have 3 kids and a mortgage. Then they started gaslighting me, then even threatening me, and all of this would go in a repeating cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages on their own, which were more fake apologies and gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger. So I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to the police seriously because family. When I last spoke with my sister and brother-in-law, they refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did, even when I suggested they just sell the video games that were purchased with the money from the cans. Then they had the audacity to say I'd actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Oh yes, I'm the devil snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans that just screamed, "Money, money, money." So that was it. I went to the police station that morning and filed the report, gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock they smashed, showed them all of the texts which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. Hell, I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I did tell the police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete, but they classified it as a tool, especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. So fair enough, I suppose. But my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. Police came to their house and my sister and brother-in-law were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently all three of my nephews went from being cocky little shits to crying like babies when they were being put in cuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with, that's sort of friends with my sister, was there to see it. And shortly after the arrest, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail till Monday morning, and now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property, vandalism, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously, as there has been complaints about my nephews for some time, but nothing was proven until now. The past few months, bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area. Don't know if it was my nephews or not, but they're likely suspects. And with word spreading of their arrest, let's hope my neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. My sister and brother-in-law showed up at my house too. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they're enablers who refused to hold their kids accountable for their actions. That made them just scream and pound on my door more till I threatened to call the police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it now, so they left without any more trouble. But they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or brother-in-law. Instead, I decided to just save all of the messages they send me because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money, and I've already replaced the destroyed padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end, I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to screw with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousin, etc. They're all supporting me in this because my nephews have stolen from them too. And after banning my nephews from my house, some of them did the same. I'm going to push for my nephews to get community service, and the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know they'll hate that the most. Whenever made to do any kind of work they don't want to do, they just stand around griping and acting like the whole world is against them. So hardly anything ever gets done. Perhaps a few 100 hours of unpaid work will teach them some manners. They've been spoiled far too much. Definitely file in small claims court if you don't get restitution. It is quite easy and the clerks will walk you through the process. Make sure that you request that they also pay for your court costs. Filing fees, service of papers fees, time off work, not sure about this, are all compensable costs that they should pay for. Once you get the judgment for payment, you then have to collect it. You can collect from their jobs or their bank accounts. I have a feeling this is the first of many more police interactions with those boys. Maybe the parents will be happy when they only get to see them through a reinforced glass window. I just don't understand how the parents of these juvenile delinquents can save their family and their children. They're not doing your nephews any favors by letting them get away with their behavior. One wonders whether they would use the above excuses if they hurt someone badly. Teach these parents and their obnoxious offsprings a lesson they won't forget. Hopefully the youth in question might turn their lives around, however, given their age, I highly doubt they will. Next story. I'm from the UK and went to a high school that was well known for usually being good at supporting autistic students. I should point out here that I'm autistic. Heck, they even had a specialized room for all the autistic students to hang out in if they choose during break and lunch times. Most of the support staff were pretty good. Some clearly understood autism pretty well, but with some of it, it felt like the school just picked some random teaching assistants and told them, "You're supporting the autistic students now," without any training or whatever. There was one support staff that nobody liked. Let's call her Mrs. Madison. She was that grumpy staff member that would always have something to say, and I'm sure everybody who went to school knew at least one person like that there. Usually, about 3 times a week, I'd have to have sessions with her to learn social skills. I'm one of the good students, so sometimes I would be on her good side, but she seemed to have a mindset of normalizing the autistic students. As many may also know, autistic people are known for having particularly strong interests that some may see as obsessions. For me, it was animation, particularly SpongeBob. Now, I liked the show, and everyone knew that, but I never talked about it to intrude on lessons, annoy people, except maybe friends jokingly, and it certainly wasn't damaging to my mental health or anything. It was just a passion that kept me really happy. But no, she was having none of that. She would forbid me from ever mentioning the word SpongeBob, would actively try to get me to stop enjoying my interests, and tried to downplay my dreams and ambitions. I made it clear I wanted to get into animation for university to try to become an animator. One conversation I'll never forget with Mrs. Madison was when she sternly told me for no real reason, "You'll probably never become an animator." When I questioned this, her reasoning was, "Well, when I was your age, I wanted to move to New Zealand. And do you see me living there now?" I wish I'd retorted with, "Well, just because you couldn't try and follow your dreams doesn't mean I should give up on mine." But I was shocked and angry at that point. Since then, I have indeed gone and studied animation at university. Whilst I haven't landed a full-time career in the field, I have numerous animation roles at companies previously, as well as created my own short animation film. My dad works at that school, and he's promised me if I ever do land a full-time career in animation, he will be sure she's one of the first to hear that news. On the spectrum here, age 55, moderate case, what used to be called Asperger's. We have the ability to do what I call data swallowing. Study everything about some specific field. Where it goes wrong is somebody gets wrapped up in something financially useless, baseball scores, train schedule, something like that. Animation theory and technique is potentially valuable. When you harness this for some skill or knowledge base you need, it can be ridiculously powerful. Bill Gates is on the spectrum, as is Steve Wozniak. Hell, the whole computer biz was built by Aspies. Silicon Valley had a big wave of full autistic to a disabled level babies because Asperger's dad and mom were meeting in high tech. They're both functional, but the kids... Oops. Next story. Me, 31F, brother 28M, got married in October 2019. The wedding was beautiful. My nephew 6M threw the ring, empty box, into the little lake that fancy wedding venues have for aesthetic, and everyone had a good time. December 2020 comes around and our great-grandma passes away at 100 right before Christmas. Because of the holidays, my great-grandma's funeral didn't happen for a few weeks. Grandma Great didn't want a huge fuss. She actually argued with my grandma and great uncles about whether anything should be done. The compromise was we would have a private viewing and place red roses on her casket after she'd been lowered into the grave. My now husband, then long-term boyfriend 31M, and I live about an 8-hour drive from my hometown, and my older cousin 41F lives about 12 hours out of town. Since we both live in different states from our home state, we rarely see each other. Work for me between the wedding and the funeral was a blur of meetings and long work days, and I had forgotten which of my cousins. I have over 30 cousins, not including their spouses, I'd seen at the wedding. And since it's a decent drive for her, I assumed entitled cousin hadn't gone to the wedding. No judgment. Several cousins didn't go because of the distance. So I see her at the funeral and I mention how it's good to see her since it's been a while, but I wish it were on better terms. She gets up, looks at me and says, "What about brother's wedding?" Which I still haven't gotten my thank you card for, by the way. Yes, this last bit was with a raised voice so everyone in the viewing room could hear. I suggested it was sitting in her mailbox or the post office. Had lost it since I recently had some mail get misplaced and got stuck at the actual building instead of getting delivered to my mailbox. She wouldn't hear anything other than my brother and sister-in-law 26F were rude and hadn't sent her a card. When my cousin gets like that, I've learned it's best to walk away and ignore her, so that's what I did. After the funeral, my parents invited my brother's family, wife, son, and him, and mine, my husband and I, out to dinner before husband and I left town. We met at the restaurant, and sister-in-law mentions how rude EC was to bring up the thank you card at the funeral because multiple people let sister-in-law know EC is upset over this card. I apologize to sister-in-law and brother because it's not my fault EC brought up the wedding. Everyone tells me it's not my fault, EC has no tact. Sister-in-law says that she hand-delivered the card to EC when she was in town for a birthday because why waste the postage when you can give it in person? Husband and I go home, live our lives. COVID hits the US, so husband and I cancel all travel plans to visit family. September 2020 comes and husband and I decide we can safely make the 8-hour drive to my parents because we really only need to make a stop for gas, and there's a lot of small towns where the positive rate was really low. So we go up for my nephew's birthday. We get there and my dad lets me know that the situation with EC and brother has exploded. He never gave me the details, but he said Aunt, EC's mom, got involved, said nasty things about my mom and dad, and couldn't let that stand. So he told Aunt off. My aunt lives with my grandma, so she got stuck between her kids fighting. My dad tells me that he's no longer speaking to Aunt until she apologizes. Aunt says she's not speaking to my dad or brother until they apologize. Cousin is only speaking to her mom. Siblings and our grandma, so my dad tells me if we want to visit my aunt, we can. There's no judgment. He doesn't want this fight to come between me and my aunt, but we have to go to her house, so that's what we've done the handful of times we've made it up there. Significantly less than normal thanks to the pandemic. Grandma is devastated. She refuses to celebrate holidays or birthdays with either of her kids or any of us grandkids. Instead of getting us gifts that she knows we'll like, she gives cash. We don't have big family dinners and barbecues like we used to, and when I call my grandma on holidays that husband and I aren't in town for, I get to hear her tear up because she misses the family gathering and hates what happened. I agree with her decision. The family gatherings we have now don't seem right. So husband and I have found reasons to not be around for actual holidays. Not difficult with the distance, and our dog recently had health issues. I don't really expect any advice, I just needed to vent. This has been on my mind because I'm going up to visit my family in a few weeks, and I found myself dreading the